Good afternoon. Welcome to the launch event of the Regional Food Security and Nutrition Outlook in Latin America and the Caribbean 2024. I am Fernando Reyes Pantoja, FAO Regional Communications Officer, and today I will be your moderator. We would like to greet the authorities and delegates from the governments of Latin America and the Caribbean and the representatives of academia, the private sector, and civil society who are joining us today. We would like to make special mention of the Latin American and Caribbean media outlets that are participating in this launch event. We will answer some of your questions today, and we have thus far 42 media outlets joining us here. So again, we will answer some of your questions, which we have received in advance, and we will continue to receive questions during the presentation of this publication via the Zoom chat. Now, the Regional Outlook is the main publication on food security and nutrition situation in the region, and on an annual basis, it provides us with an update of the indicators linked to SDG 2, Zero Hunger, and the targets of the World Health Assembly. The 2024 edition presents us with an update of the data and trends related to food insecurity and malnutrition in Latin America and the Caribbean in recent years. Moreover, it reports that climate variability and extreme weather events such as droughts, floods, and storms reduce agricultural productivity, disrupt food supply chains, and increase prices, while also affecting food environments, thus jeopardizing the achievements made in reducing hunger and malnutrition in the region. The Regional Outlook is a joint publication of FAO, the United Nations, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization, and the United Nations Children's Fund and the World Food Program. We would like to greet and welcome the regional directors who will be representing the agencies that are part of this publication. From Rome, we have Mario Lubetkin, Assistant Director General and FAO Regional Representative for Latin America and the Caribbean. In Panama, we have Rosana Polatri, the Regional Director of IFAD's Latin American Caribbean Division. From the WHO PAHO, or rather, in Panama as well, we have Maria Dolores Castro, the WFP Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, and on behalf of the WHO PAHO, Jarbas Barbosa, Director of the Regional Office for the Americas. And then we have from UNICEF, the Regional Director and Interim Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, Karen Hulshoff. We also are joined here today by members of the report's editorial committee, made up of officers and officials from the 5 agencies, funds, and programs co-publishing this document. We are grateful for the presence of all of the participants who have joined us here today as well for this broadcast. To learn a bit more about this document, we would like to invite you to watch the following video.
Los sistemas agroalimentarios que permiten llevar alimentos nutritivos como frutas y hortalizas hasta nuestra mesa están siendo afectados por una serie de factores como la variabilidad del clima y los fenómenos climáticos extremos, que pueden aumentar el costo de los alimentos nutritivos y hacer más inasequibles las dietas saludables, contribuyendo a la inseguridad alimentaria y la malnutrición. Estos eventos son cada vez más frecuentes y de mayor intensidad y alteran el régimen habitual de precipitaciones y temperaturas. El Panorama Regional de la Seguridad Alimentaria y la Nutrición 2024, publicado por 5 agencias de Naciones Unidas, plantea este como uno de los principales desafíos para lograr la erradicación del hambre y la malnutrición en América Latina y el Caribe. De acuerdo con el informe, 20 países de la región están altamente expuestos a sufrir eventos extremos y 14 están en una situación de vulnerabilidad para enfrentarlos. Estos fenómenos extremos impactan la disponibilidad y el acceso a los alimentos, modifican su utilización y afectan la estabilidad de la seguridad alimentaria. Esto representa una amenaza a los logros obtenidos en los últimos 2 años. En 2023, la inseguridad alimentaria moderada y grave se redujo en 6,1 puntos porcentuales en América Latina y el Caribe, en comparación a 2021, ubicándose por debajo del promedio mundial. Sin embargo, los datos de los 13 países afectados por eventos climáticos extremos mostraron un aumento promedio del hambre de 1,5 puntos porcentuales entre 2013 y 2022. Esto obliga a mirar los efectos de estos fenómenos desde la perspectiva de la seguridad alimentaria, reconociendo que el progreso es frágil y la variabilidad del clima con sus fenómenos extremos llegaron para quedarse. Los nuevos desafíos son multidimensionales, por lo que exigen políticas e intervenciones integrales para la resiliencia de las comunidades y sistemas, para anticipar, prevenir, absorber, adaptar y transformar de manera positiva frente a riesgos que amenazan la seguridad alimentaria y la nutrición. Naciones Unidas realiza un llamado a los países a acelerar las acciones para fortalecer la resiliencia dentro de los sistemas agroalimentarios y salvaguardar el progreso de la región hacia la eliminación del hambre y la malnutrición en todas sus formas, garantizando al mismo tiempo la sostenibilidad con una mirada de futuro sin dejar a nadie atrás.
Behind.
Con esta introducción escucharemos a
With this
continuación la
brief
presentación
introduction,
de las
now we will hear to a presentation by the regional directors of the 5 agencies of the UN system. They will refer to the main data and results of this publication. We would like to remind you, the participating media, that the chat is enabled in the Zoom room to record your questions, which will be answered later. To begin, I would like to invite Mariu Lubetkin, the Assistant Director General and Regional Representative of the FAO of the United Nations for Latin America and the Caribbean, to take the floor and present this report. Thank you, Fernando. Colleagues from UNICEF, from the WHO, from the World Food Program, from IFAD, representatives and officers, representatives of governments and international organizations taking part in this event and in this document. It's very important for all of us to be here today. We know that you have joined us for many years, and we're truly appreciative in your interest in this topic that is of such importance to the region. Now, naturally, it's a pleasure and honor for me to be here with you today to preside over the launching of the 2024 Outlook. We know that this Outlook provides statistics annually and refers to the updated trends with regard to progress towards eradicating hunger and malnutrition. Now, this report, drafted by FAO and 4 other UN agencies joining us here today, focuses on 3 key components. The first component are the data submitted with regard to the SOFI, the State of Food Security and Nutrition, in 2024, and SOFI referred to setbacks with regard to eradicating hunger, and this is jeopardizing the international agenda and securing international objectives. Now, for the second consecutive year, the region has showed a reduction in many of the indicators, showing, allowing us to stand out as the only region with positive trend. Now, this progress is attributed to different factors, such as bouncing back from the post-pandemic economic delays, and also increase in public spending for social protection and international trade. Now, we have also seen improvements with regard to employment and salaries, and according to the ECLAC report from 2023, there still seem to be significant disparities within the region. Women, rural communities, and vulnerable populations continue to be the most affected groups. And although we do see that in some areas we have seen improvements with regard to the affordability of a healthy diet, there are other groups that still face challenges. Now, despite progress, it's important to secure progress over the years, and we know that this is challenging. Malnutrition, chronic malnutrition, overweight, and obesity have a disproportionate impact on certain groups. For example, we see that in some countries, children under 5 face issues such as low weight and size, while obesity and overweight in adults has a significant impact. Now, according to the SOFI report, there are 3 main reasons why we have food insecurity: conflict, climate variability and extreme events, and the economic crises. These 3 causes, when combined, have a result on lack of access to healthy diets, and they bring about unhealthy environments. Inequality continues to persist as well, having more of an impact on hunger and malnutrition. And finally, the regional outlook has a second area of focus, which refers to an analysis in terms of the impact of climate variability and extreme events. Now, there are certain key determinants of food security in Latin America and the Caribbean, and exposing us to these phenomena. And just after Asia, the countries in our region are facing extreme vulnerability to climate events. 52 out of 100 countries are vulnerable to negative impacts of food security, and the variability of climate and extreme events such as drought, flooding, and storms are a daily event that many individuals face, and they have an impact on livelihoods throughout the region. These events negatively impact agricultural productivity. They bring about a situation of instability for value chains and food chains, and they have an impact on structural aspects such as conflict and economic crisis, inequality, and limited access to healthy diets. Now, without a doubt, increased vulnerability of our communities is an issue, and these phenomena affect 4 areas, 4 dimensions of food security. The availability of food has been affected by a drop in productivity and overall general drop in production. As far as access is concerned, we can see that there are losses, economic losses, with regard to the prices of food as well. This is an issue, and we know that given food insecurity and a lower quality food and less food also has an impact on us all. Now, given all of the above, climate variability and extreme events are a threat to food and nutritional security in the region. This is the context, and here we are launching 2024 Outlook, which really underscores the urgent need to become more resilient, have our food systems, agri-food systems more resilient in order to better face climate variability and extreme events. Now, the report also underscores a third area and refers to the importance of implementing a comprehensive response based on policies and decisive action to strengthen our agri-food systems capacity, to make them more resilient so that we can be a step ahead, prevent, absorb, adapt, and transform in a positive, effective fashion the food security, the agri-food systems in order to better absorb the risks. Now, we know that there are some key examples of policies and actions that have been designed to boost climate resilience, to prevent setbacks with regard to food security and malnutrition in the region. And these include implementing early warning systems or anticipatory action or other capacity building efforts to boost production. And moreover, the report refers to the importance of food and crop diversification and preserving species, as well as promoting these, and forestry systems as well that contribute to biodiversity and food diversity. The report also focuses on the importance of having social protection measures and food school systems, as well as subsidies for securing access to healthy diets. Moreover, I would like to mention that the report underscores that the transformation process in the region, although facing significant challenges, has shown that there's been a strong commitment to this process over the years and a strong commitment to joint efforts focused on concrete results.
This effort is of the essence in order to address the immediate challenges and to guarantee long-term progress. The governments of Latin America and the Caribbean are showing a firm commitment in this fight against poverty and hunger, prioritizing this issue in order to guarantee sustainable development. We could think about the food security and nutrition plan of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, SANCELAC. This is a key platform to coordinate efforts and to share knowledge and develop joint strategies. In this context, the next meeting of Ministers of Agriculture of CELAC 2025, which will take place in Comayagua, Honduras on February 3rd, which has the confirmation of 35 countries from the region and international guests as well, will be a very important occasion to consolidate commitments and to advance on policies that can strengthen food security and nutrition in the region. And the same with the CAF, or the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty of the G20, reinforced the cooperation between countries to eradicate hunger, reduce malnutrition, and to generate more inclusive agri-food systems that are more resilient, more resistant, and more sustainable in view of the impacts of climate change. This effort, however, requires the active collaboration of multiple sectors. This fight against poverty requires a comprehensive approach to have more resilient, resistant, sustainable, and inclusive results. In the last few years, I have witnessed the advances in the region, a joint and collective effort that transcends people and organizations, but it inspires us to build a more fair world without inequalities, without poverty, without hunger, and especially where no one is left behind. Thank you very much. We thank Mr. Lubetkin for his remarks, and we will now hear Ms. Rosana Polastri, Regional Director of IFAD's Latin America and Caribbean Division. You have the floor. Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon from Rome. Distinguished authorities and professionals of the press that are with us here today, Mario Lubetkin, colleague of FAO, and Lola Castro, Maria Dolores, and of course, Harvard Barbosa, Karin Hurso from UNICEF. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to participate in this event and to share the results of the Regional Food Security and Nutrition Outlook for Latin America and the Caribbean. Here at the IFAD, we are pleased to have worked with the teams from FAO, with PAHO, the WHO, WFP, and UNICEF. And of course, I have a few reflections. The first is the evaluation of the initial results of the report, the urgency to adapt to these food urgencies in view of climate change, and of course, mobilizing new resources and having financial mechanisms that can allow rural areas to advance in hunger and the reduction of hunger. So what does this outlook say? Let's begin with the positive aspects. In 2023, for the second consecutive year, hunger and food insecurity were dropped in Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2023, in Latin America and the Caribbean, 20 million people stopped having food insecurity, and hunger is affecting 2.9 million people less than in 2022. It is the only region where we've had such a reduction in the prevalence of food security. But this should not make us complacent. On the contrary, we need to look at these figures at a more granular way. There is still a large number, large number of people who suffer food insecurity, and it is quite significant. In 2023, 58.8% of the Caribbean had food insecurity, and it was twice as much as Latin America. In the previous year, we also see that the food security in rural areas was higher than in urban areas, as well as being higher in women than in men. And again, the gender gap is higher in our region than in other parts of the world and then the world average. So it is important to have public investment and programs in these areas that have been left behind. Second, the report shows the impact of climate change, puts it at the core of food insecurity. And these extreme climate events or climate disasters affect the production and distribution of food, increasing prices and, of course, affecting the vulnerable populations more frequently, and this is increasingly frequent in our region. At IFAD, we know this firsthand. We work with small producers that face these extreme events and also the variability of the weather, and that affects their work in sowing and reaping their crops. It is important to strengthen these food systems in order to build such resilience. In the projects that we fund here at IFAD, we work with a multidimensional approach, seeking the resilience of the food system. In food production, we invest to increase resilience in rural communities and offering them agricultural practices that can increase their productivity and improve their agricultural practices. We help with energy, water, etc. And in terms of water collection, the producers can continue to work during the drought times or seasons. So it leads to a better use of natural resources. And IFAD also helps support platforms that allow for more updated climate information so that the producers can adapt their cultivation programs and also to plant more resistant species to climate change, especially at a local level. We have accompanied several countries in developing different products that allow producers to recover from these losses brought about by floods and droughts in order to continue with the production of food. The breadth of these solutions is quite extensive, but they need financial support. We need to invest more in a more intelligent manner, focusing and taking these resources where they are most needed. We need new capital to have a greater financing offer, for example, from the private sector. In this sense, IFAD has issued sustainable bonds in order to increase funding aimed at the rural transformation. We also believe there is a very transformative potential in these development banks. In Brazil, we have co-funded with the National Development Bank in Brazil, the BNDES, that works with rural areas that are vulnerable to climate change. And this is a model that we hope to replicate in other countries of the region. And we have approved a new work program with these banks recently and for the entire financing system. We are working on this fight against hunger, but figures are still higher than before the pandemic, which means we still have a long way to go. We need to double our efforts in order to have better food systems, and to achieve this, we must have rural solutions and assist and support rural producers so that they have basic infrastructure, climate information systems, better practices, and of course, access to financial assistance that will help them address these challenges. It must also be equal for men and women, as well as vulnerable populations, so that this reduction of hunger does not leave anyone behind. So in summary, the figures are encouraging. They're going in the right direction, but there are differences in our population groups, and this does not necessarily improve and sometimes even shows setbacks. It is part of the permanent effects of climate change that we need to find innovative and technological solutions. We also need to invest more in the rural sector in order to bridge these food and security gaps. And I truly hope that this report is of use for the design of public policies Thank you for your attention, and I am at your disposition for any questions you may have. Thank you very much to the Regional Director of IFAD, Rosana Polastri. Before we continue, we would like to thank everyone who has joined us today for your interest for SAN 24. We have around 300 users connected on our website, social media, Zoom, and also through the live streaming on YouTube. Following, we will offer the floor to Lola Castro, the Regional Director of the WFP. Thank you, Fernando, and good morning from Panama. Good morning to all colleagues that are with us here today. Thank you first to Mario Rosana, Carvas, and Karin for being here today, and for all the colleagues, as well as the members of the press. It's very clear after Mario and Rosana's presentations what the advances have been in Latin America and the Caribbean. And however, the report, as they mentioned, also tells us that we have just finished the warmest year in history, and there has been a record in greenhouse gases. And we know that climate is changing and the globe, the planet is warming up, and people in Latin America and the Caribbean need to guarantee their food security despite climate change. We have not seen this much in the region. In the last few months, we've seen fires devastating the Amazon and Bolivia. Flames have consumed a territory of the size of South Korea and Brazil, as well as part of cities in Italy. And there's been droughts that have ruined crops, but also led to floods. And these have been worsened by El Nino. And we have seen in the Caribbean that there was a very hyperactive hurricane season. And in July, Hurricane Derry became a hurricane of Category 5, probably the toughest in history. And we have also seen a series of chain disasters that have destroyed homes. And this happened in Honduras, Colombia, and many small island states, developing states. And we see that this is becoming increasingly frequent. It is the climate that is ill, that is endangering food and nutrition of millions of people in our region. And this regional outlook is offering us information to produce food, to transport it and put it at people's tables, which is becoming increasingly difficult. However, we have good news. We've seen that people who suffer food insecurity in Latin America and the Caribbean are below the global average. It's almost 20 million people that are no longer suffering food insecurity, and this is all thanks to the economic recovery of the governments that are moving towards solutions and trying to address food security and nutrition in a multi-sectorial manner in times of climate crisis.
We know that drought, flooding, and storms are some of the reasons producing hunger. And we know that these can be predicted and addressed with more security. And we can also anticipate and stay a step ahead with regard to our humanitarian response. The World Food Program works closely with the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean as partners and other partners mentioned in order to have social protection programs that include preventative components and preparatory and response actions as well to address these extreme climate phenomena. Now, this allows us to save lives and many different livelihoods. There are many ways to protect people. For example, in the Caribbean, we provide support to the governments so that they can acquire sovereign climate insurances. And these insurances provide them with coverage, and they will activate when an event occurs, such as a hurricane or storm, and they provide an injection of liquidity into the government coffers to provide support for economic recovery of the households and crops affected and protect individuals as well in their homes. Moreover, Transforming agri-food systems in the region involves local purchasing and value chains that are closer to the people, and our basis of these chains is protecting individuals and the environment. And when the food is consumed closer to its place of origin, we see that the opportunities, economic opportunities for the communities multiply, and they provide safeguards for food heritage. In Guatemala and Honduras, for example, we have shown that each farmer that sells his or her food to close by social protection systems can earn up to 1865 additional dollars per year, 1,865. And we see that that's equivalent to 2.4 times. And the poverty line, moreover, we see that trade that is close to where it's produced it provides more benefits as well, and also has benefits with regard to reducing the carbon footprint. Now, if we were the food programs, school food programs have been mentioned as one solution, a clear example of one way to further connect food systems with social protection and climate resistance. In our region, we see that they serve more than 80 million boys and girls, and we see that there's a significant investment in this yearly. 15 countries purchase food locally for their schools, and this makes a significant difference for local economies, stimulating local economies, and also bring about improvements with regard to gas emissions. The World Food Program is quite aligned with this proposal and keeps individuals at the heart of the solutions to do away with hunger and malnutrition. And under the leadership of the Latin American and Caribbean governments, with close coordination with our partners such as UNICEF and WHO, we will continue to address climate actions that will protect those who suffer from these crises and that transform systems so that they're more resilient and more respectful of nature. As I have already said, there's no time to lose, and we need to continue making progress with regard to eradicating hunger and malnutrition in our region, which has grown significantly. We need to address this urgently and in a close, concerted fashion, and to support the most vulnerable in our region. As the outlook mentions, this public policy is the cornerstone of this. Thank you to Dolores Castro, the WFP Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, we know that the outlook addresses how food insecurity affects the most vulnerable individuals. So now let me give the floor to Karim Hulshoff, the interim director of UNICEF for Latin America and the Caribbean.
Buenos días, estimados y estimadas colegas de FAO, FIDA, OPS, PMA, socios y miembros de la prensa. Es un honor acompañarlos en este lanzamiento del panorama de la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional 2024. Un reporte que resalta los avances logrados
Food Security
y los
Nutrition Outlook.
desafíos
We know that this is a
persistentes en el
report that
tema,
refers
con
to the
especial
progress
énfasis
secured
en el
and the
impacto de los eventos climáticos
ongoing
extremos en
challenges
América
in
Latina
this
y el
field.
Caribe.
It places special
La
emphasis on
región
the
ha logrado
impact of
avances
extreme climate events
positivos
in
en
Latin
la
America and the
reducción de
Caribbean.
la
The
desnutrición,
region has secured positive progress with regard to reducing chronic malnutrition in boys and girls,
entre otros factores,
resulting from a variety of different factors such as robust public policies and social protection. Despite this, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we see that this is one of the most urbanized regions of the world. We see that there remain unhealthy contexts that have a great impact on all the different forms of malnutrition that disproportionately have an impact on the most vulnerable groups, including rural communities, indigenous communities, and Afro-descendant communities. Now, in this context, boys, girls, and adolescents face, at the same time, malnutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, and overweight. Now, this shows that this is such a broad-based, complex phenomenon. Now, we know that there are structural inequalities with regard to the lack of available food and a lack of availability to healthy diets for the poorest families. This is in addition to high exposure to these groups. Now, we know that this region is the most affected by extreme climate events, and according to the report, 74 or a large number of the countries face these phenomena. And all of this calls for urgent action, action that needs to be coordinated as well to better mitigate the impact of climate change on boys, girls, and adolescents, and at the same time to make our region more resilient. We are fully convinced that it is necessary to have comprehensive actions and prioritize these actions to guarantee protection of childhood nutrition. First, we need to prioritize the right of boys, girls, women to food and nutrition and enable them to be more involved in climate action decisions. This involves including resilient nutrition as a component of climate policies. For example, fostering maternal the breastfeeding from the moment children are born as a way to guarantee access to nutritious, sustainable food for boys and girls and adolescents. Secondly, it's important to reinforce the capacity of the health system to offer essential services related to nutrition and to at schools and to ensure that schools are equipped to provide healthy diets and services that will allow them to reduce climate vulnerability and to take advantage of social protection systems in order to improve nutrition. And thirdly, and finally, to boost the availability and access to healthy food that's also safe and affordable and sustainable by way of low carbon supply chains. This needs to be coupled with the creating environments that allow for healthy food and that limit the consumption of ultra-processed products while also fostering healthy food practices that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And UNICEF has reaffirmed its commitment to working closely with governments and the UN agencies, civil society, and the private sector to transform food systems, to guarantee healthier, more resilient environments as well. It is imperative that we work together in order to tackle malnutrition in all of its different formats, and so that we may build a better future, a future in which every boy and girl actually has access to sufficient and appropriate nutrition that's sustainable at the same time. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Es un placer para mí participar en representación de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, OPS, en el lanzamiento del informe Panorama Regional 2024 de la Seguridad Alimentaria y Nutricional para América Latina y el Caribe, que se realizó en colaboración con nuestras agencias hermanas de las Naciones Unidas. La Organización de las Naciones Unidas para la Agricultura e indica que a malnutrição em todas suas formas sigue afetando as populações que vivem em situações de vulnerabilidade em nossa região.
On groups that live in a situation marked by vulnerability in our region, especially rural populations, indigenous and Afro-descendant communities. Overweight and obesity are two growing phenomena in our region. Over the last 50 years, we have seen that the rates of overweight and obesity have tripled, and they have an impact. They affect 67% of the individuals in our region. Now, these conditions are a key component, a key risk factor for non-communicable diseases. Having a healthy diet is the foundation for good health, well-being, and growth and development, and protects individuals against all the forms of malnutrition. So a healthy diet also is more sustainable with regard to an environmental perspective. Now, even though all of this is true, we have seen that healthy diets may not always be accessible to all. According to the outlook for the region, this region has the highest price of a healthy diet. In the Caribbean in 2022, 50% of the population was unable to have access to a healthy diet, and we see that not so healthy, ultra-processed food has been growing, and we see that this is something supported by a very aggressive market. Inequality, social inequalities, and poverty continue to have an impact on access to nutritious food and healthy food now, and they contribute to higher mortality rate and early death rate. Now, in order to address these challenges, we need to have comprehensive health-related policies that include social protection and that transform food systems. And we have seen that different organizations have taken measures to speed up the plan to stop obesity, and they have also taken measures to consolidate and prioritize and accelerate national measures to address this epidemic, which is obesity. We see that some countries are promoting fiscal policies, including taxes. We have public policies that are applicable to healthy food purchases that regulate advertising as well, and on substitutes for mother's milk and food safety. And we have seen that there are food labeling programs as well. Now, we know that there are comprehensive integrated actions and collaborative actions carried out by the 5 UN agencies, and these are the cornerstone of what we do to support the member states and to work towards securing the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Con esta última intervención,
With
iniciamos
these
ahora
final
el espacio de
remarks,
preguntas y
we will now
respuestas con los
begin
medios de
the
comunicación.
Q&A portion
Para
of this
responder a estas
launch
preguntas
with the
también se
media
unen al
outlets.
evento Daniela
Now,
Godoy,
we are
oficial
also
principal de
joined by
políticas
Daniela
públicas,
Godoy,
seguridad alimentaria y
who
nutrición
is
de la FAO,
the
Paula
FAO
Vélez,
Food
especialista regional de nutrición
Policy
y UNICEF,
and Food Security
Leo
Officer.
Ledesma,
We are also
asesor
joined by
regional
Paula
de
Velis,
alimentación y
a
nutrición
regional
y actividad
specialist
física
in
en
nutrition
escuelas
from
de UNICEF
UNICEF,
y de
and
OMS,
also an expert in
La primera
the
pregunta es
food
para
school
FIDA.
feed program. We also have
El informe refleja que las mujeres
Lendert
sufren mayor nivel de
Devine, Regional
inseguridad
Advisor on Food,
alimentaria
Nutrition, and
entre
Physical
hombres,
Activity
y
in
también que
schools.
hay un mayor
Now,
nivel de
we
incidencia en zonas
know
rurales que en
that
urbanas.
there is a greater
¿Qué acciones
incidence of
se
food
deben implementar
insecurity
para cerrar
in
estas brechas? Así también
rural areas,
recibimos una pregunta
and
respecto
what
a
actions
cómo la producción de
have been taken
alimentos
place to close
afecta
the
a la
gaps between rural
diversificación.
and urban areas, and
Adelante,
also
FIDA,
what
con la
has been carried out with regard to fostering greater commodity production.
Integrar las dos preguntas en
Thank you. I'm
una,
going
en
to
una
try
sola
to
respuesta.
address both questions in a single
Empiezo
answer.
con
I'd like to begin
el
with
aspecto de las brechas de mujeres.
the gaps, the gap
Aquí lo
for
que
women. And
nosotros vemos
here
es
what
que
we see is that
en los proyectos que estamos
in the projects
financiando,
that we're
estamos
funding,
implementando algunas
we are
actividades tales como
implementing
las
some
de
activities such
cerrando
as
brechas, ¿no?
bridging gaps.
Buscamos
And in this
contemplar
sense, we
acciones
seek to
específicas para
include
cerrar dicha
specific
brecha.
actions to
Ya
bridge those
venimos
gaps.
trabajando
We've
en
been
3 áreas
working on
estratégicas.
3
La
strategic
primera
areas.
es
The first
fomentar la participación y el
is
liderazgo
the
de las mujeres rurales
promotion
en los
and
procesos de toma de
of leadership
decisiones
of
en las instituciones
rural
rurales y
women so
en
that
las
they can take
organizaciones
part in
agricultoras.
discussions and
La
decision
segunda es
making in
promover el empoderamiento
agriculture.
económico de la mujer,
Second, the economic
facilitando su acceso
empowerment
a
of
recursos
women,
financieros,
facilitating their
recursos
access to financial
productivos y
resources,
reforzando sus capacidades para que puedan
and
participar y
to reinforce
beneficiarse
their
de las
capacity so that they
actividades
can benefit
económicas
from
rentables.
economic
Y la
activities that are more
tercera es
profitable.
lograr un
The third
equilibrio más
is to
equitativo de la
achieve
carga de
an
trabajo y
equitable
en la distribución de los beneficios
balance between
entre
the
hombres
workload and the
y
distribution of
mujeres.
benefits between
Como
men and
sabemos,
women.
las
As we
mujeres
know,
en las áreas rurales muchas veces
women
son
in
cabezas
rural
de hogar,
areas many
en
times
donde
are heads of household,
tienen que ocuparse no solo de su parcela,
and they
sino
need to
de la
take care
familia,
of their
de los hijos
land,
y
but
también de los
also
adultos
of
mayores. Y
their
son,
family,
como se dice en inglés, time poor,
seniors,
son
and
más que
children.
pobres,
So
tienen escasez de tiempo para
they
ellos,
have
¿no?
a lack
En varios de
of
los
time
países de
for
la región hemos
themselves.
aplicado,
And
como mencioné al
in
principio,
several
la
countries of the
metodología
region, we have
cerrando
applied the
brechas, mientras
methodology
que
of
mediante la cual
bridging gaps
trabajamos con los
by
hombres
means
y
of
las
which we
mujeres y
work with
organizaciones
men and
de
women
productores para que juntos
in
identifiquen las
producers
brechas
organizations so that we
existentes y
can
elaboren los
identify
planes
the existing
de
gaps
acción
jointly and thus elaborate the
para eliminarlas,
corresponding
¿no?
and
Porque
necessary
solamente
action plans
atendiendo y
to
mirando
eliminate
con el
those.
lente de
Because
género,
simply
promoviendo el
looking
género
from
solo a la
the
mujer, no
lens of
podemos avanzar mucho.
the
Se tiene
gender
que
gap,
también
we
atender
won't
lo que
really
hoy se llama en
make
las
much progress.
metodologías
So we
las
need to look at the
masculinidades.
methodologies.
El empoderamiento de la mujer es, por supuesto,
Masculinity.
una
The
cuestión de
empowerment of
justicia,
women
pero
is also a
además,
matter of
cuando las
well, it's a matter
mujeres
of
tienen
justice, but
mayor
it also has to
acceso
do
a
with women having
recursos
more
productivos como la
access to
tierra y
productive
la
resources,
participación en la toma de
such
decisiones,
as
mejora
land,
la
and
seguridad
their
alimentaria
participation
nutricional de
in
los hogares,
decision making,
generando un
improving
efecto
the
positivo,
security of their
virtuoso en los
homes,
sistemas
generating a
alimentarios.
positive and virtuous effect
En
on
cuanto
food
a la
systems.
pregunta
And regarding the question on
sobre los cómo la producción de commodities afecta
how
a la
the production of
diversificación de la
commodities affects
producción,
the diversification of
pues
production,
es
well,
correcto, hay
it
un
is correct.
efecto, ¿no? Si
There
es que hay
is an
una
effect,
concentración
and if there is a
en un sistema
concentration
monocultivo, lo
in
cual
a
reduce
single
la
crop
diversificación y lo cual
system,
a la vez de afectar la
and
disponibilidad de
aside
alimentos
from
diversos
affecting
en el
the
sistema
availability of
alimentario disponibles, también afecta la
these
sostenibilidad de los
products,
sistemas de
it also
producción.
affects the sustainability of the
Existen una
production
multitud
systems.
de semillas
There
y especies
are
locales que tienen mayor
many
resistencia frente al
seeds,
cambio
local
climático,
seeds, and
pero
products
estas se
that have
están
more resistance
perdiendo.
to climate change, but
Así
these
que
are
diversificar los
being
sistemas
lost.
de
So
producción
diversifying the
incorporando este
production
tipo de
systems,
semillas
including
nativas, va a
these
permitir
native
mitigar
seeds,
los
will
riesgos
allow
climáticos, pero también
mitigating
puede,
the climate
también se
risks,
necesita
climate change risks,
promover el
but we
acceso
also
local
need to promote
a una
local
alimentación
access
saludable y
to
balanceada, ¿no?
healthy
Es un
and
tipo
balanced
de
food
brecha que se tiene que atender
meals. This is a
de
gap that
manera
needs to be taken
conjunta.
care of
En cuanto a la
jointly.
inflación,
In terms
si
of
queremos reducir los
inflation,
precios de los
if
alimentos,
we want to
especialmente los
reduce the
alimentos
price of
nutritivos,
food, especially
es importante también
nutritional
invertir
food,
en mejorar la
it's important
productividad
to
de
invest
frutas,
on
verduras, legumbres,
improving the
etcétera,
productivity
¿no?
of
Esto pues va a
fruit,
permitir reducir los precios
vegetables,
al consumidor
and
final y
this will
fomentar el
reduce the
acceso a
price to the
una dieta
final
sostenible.
consumer and will
La
promote more healthy
relación
diets.
directa
The direct
entre la producción de
relationship between the
commodities y la
production of
inflación en general
commodities
de los
and
alimentos y
inflation
alimentos
of that
nutritivos no la
affecting
podemos
food in
determinar
general is
como
something
algo
we cannot
lineal, ¿no?
determine
Hay
in
que
a
entender
linear fashion.
el
We
tema
need to
del incremento de los precios de alimentos por
understand
otro tipo
the
de intervención
increase
y no
of food price
necesariamente
with other
desincentivando
interventions and
la
not
producción
necessarily
de
by
monocultivos.
discouraging the production of single crops.
Muchísimas gracias a la directora
Thank you
regional
very
de
much
FIDA.
to the regional
La
director
siguiente
of
pregunta
IFAD.
es
The next
para la directora
question
regional
is
de
for the
PMA, la
regional
señora Lola
director
Castro,
of
y dice,
the WFP,
cuando ocurren
Lola
catástrofes
Castro. When
naturales,
there
¿qué
are
herramientas y
natural
recursos tienen a su
catastrophes
disposición
or
los gobiernos en
disasters,
la
what
región
tools and
para
resources do the
proteger a
region's
las
governments have
personas
at their
más
disposal to
vulnerables contra
protect
el
the
hambre
most
y la
vulnerable
malnutrición?
people from hunger and
Sí,
malnutrition?
muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you
Bueno,
very much for your
digamos que
question.
podemos resumir en
Let's say that we
tres
can summarize
las
this
herramientas
in
que los gobiernos de nuestra región de
three
América Latina
tools
y el
our
Caribe
governments in
utilizan.
Latin America and the
Una
Caribbean
sería los sistemas de protección
use.
social,
One would
que ya
be
existen y
social
que son
security. It
abundantes,
exists,
que
it's
están bien
abundant,
enfocados
and
y los
it
países los
is
utilizan
well organized, and countries use this in case of catastrophes to expand horizontally and vertically. And this can happen with monetary transfers or with other programs in schools and many others. That is one that is used in our region. The second that governments use all the time is the improvement, and they have very much improved the early alert systems and using anticipation. We have a lot of information in terms of when and how these disasters will happen. So having this information, we can anticipate and make monetary transfers to those who will be affected because we know the region where it's going to hit. And we can also prepare, as was mentioned earlier, with diversification of the production and evacuating people from these risk areas. Another area where we can prepare and alert is with the micro and macro insurance that we're seeing in our region. It is abundant in other parts of the world, but these micro insurance policies allow people and governments to quickly respond to these disasters, making monetary transfers. The third is with all the public policies promoted at a local level. We have said that local purchases have a high added value, one, because they are economic transfers to small producers, women, but we also get it to go to social protection systems, improving them, making them more local, and promoting diversity, which is very necessary. So this is pretty much it in a nutshell, the types of actions that our governments could take to reinforce and offer support to these communities. Thank you, Ms. Castro, Regional Director of the WFP, for your response. I would like to now offer the floor to the specialist Paula Vélez from UNICEF. I'll ask her a question. What actions does UNICEF prioritize to ensure resilient and sustainable food systems in view of the challenges that climate change imposes on child nutrition? You have the floor, Paula Vélez. Thank you very much, Fernando. To protect child nutrition from climate change, it's crucial to implement sustainable actions. And at UNICEF, we have three specific actions. The first is to include nutrition that is resilient to climate with certain policies, including the right to nutrition of boys, girls, adolescents, and women, and all actions related to climate change. For example, maternal breastfeeding, which is the best food for the beginning of a child's life, and it doesn't cause any carbon footprint. We also aim to strengthen the capacity of essential systems with healthcare systems, offering essential nutrition services, guaranteeing that the schools offer adequate diets, and also aiming to reduce climate vulnerability and social protection systems to improve maternal and child nutrition. We also seek to have sustainable food chains. So the idea is to create nutrition environments that limit ultra-processed foods and encourage healthy nutrition practices which generate benefits for health and reduce greenhouse gas effects. That's it for us. Thank you. Thank you to Paula Vélez, Regional Specialist on Nutrition at UNICEF. We will now have a question for FAO. What is the result or the lack of a healthy diet impact of malnutrition And how do we respond to these extreme, excuse me, what is the main conclusion of the report regarding food security and nutrition in the region, and how could it be impacted by climate variability and extreme weather events? We will be hearing from FAO. Thank you for your question. As our regional representative said, the first result that we see in this report is the prevalence of hunger and food insecurity for the second year in the region. That does not happen at a worldwide level. But there are important challenges. Some have been mentioned, but I would like to stress first the noteworthy differences by subregions and also around the gender gap, because in terms of the prevalence of food insecurity in women, there is a greater prevalence. And if we look at food insecurity prevalence in women in the region, it is even higher than the prevalence in the global estimate. We also see that there are challenges such as the cost of a healthy diet in the Caribbean with the weight of children under 5 years of age. And in Caribbean, we also see an upward trend, especially in South America and Central America. And in terms of extreme climate events and nutrition, we see that the frequency of these events has increased in Latin America and the Caribbean from 1990 to 2023, showing an increase in the frequency of drought, floods, storms, and we have seen more hot days, warmer temperatures, and anomalies in the rainfall and a lack of thereof. So all this affects the prevalence of hunger, and it can worsen when these countries are being affected by other factors, such as economic recession or conflicts. In the second place, as we see in the report, we see how it affects food security. There are several questions related to this, so I'm going to refer to this specifically. It affects the availability because it causes an effect on the production. It affects crops and productivity, and it affects the access and the income of people. It affects their acquisition power and therefore their healthy access to a healthy diet. I'd also like to mention that it produces an impact at a physical level, worsening the situation of deserts and swamps in different territories. It affects the use. That is the third dimension of food insecurity. It has an impact on nutrition and the health of people. It has to do with growth, food security, and it tends to be affected. Finally, stability. And this is very important in the case of Latin America and the Caribbean, because in order to maintain this decrease in the figures that we've seen in the last 2 years, we need stability in all four dimensions of food security. The report states that climate resilience is a good path to face the effects of climate variability and extreme climate events on food security. These are multidimensional and require comprehensive and intersectorial actions. On one hand, it's important to address climate resilience, but also the way of life with complementary policies to address the cultural factors and underlying factors to this, the environments that people live in and everything that affects these structural issues. From FAO, we're looking at policies that could help us address all these challenges, and together with these, it's very relevant that the vulnerable territories strengthen their alert systems and find ways to assist the more vulnerable populations and to guarantee their food security and nutrition. In the report, we can see different experiences and evidence in the region. It's what countries are doing, and we stress the importance of working in countries that are being strongly affected by El Niño, protecting the crops, livestock, and avoiding greater food insecurity in these contexts of high vulnerability. Also, a quick recovery of the loss of food, like fishing, artisanal fishing, and avoiding a greater impact of these extreme climate events.
It's important to make progress here because otherwise we will not be able to speed up achieving the SDGs and SDG 2, for example, by 2030. Thank you. Thank you, Daniela Godoy, the main food security and nutrition policy officer. Now we will go on with our last question, which is for PAHO. It says, how does the lack of access to a healthy diet impact malnutrition in all its forms, and how is PAHO contributing to the transformation of food systems to favor health, nutrition, and the environment? We have also received a question that says, which critical food products are missing that would be very important for health? Now, to answer this question, we have Leo Neverdin, a regional food and nutrition advisor and for physical activity in schools. Thank you for your question. We have seen that
afecta mucho el acceso de una dieta saludable a la malnutrición.
Malnutrition does have an impact on having or not having access to a healthy diet does have an impact on malnutrition. And the outlook shows that in Latin America, we have the highest regional cost of securing a healthy diet. And so a healthy diet is very important because that allows us to prevent all types of malnutrition caused by deficits as well as excesses. And we are all concerned by the high rates of obesity and overweight that have tripled over the last 50 years in the region, having an impact on 2/3 of the region and having an impact on non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular disease, different types of cancer, diabetes, and others. These account for 81% of deaths. Evidence has shown us that there are benefits, health benefits, for when one consumes a diet that's rich in whole grains, fruit, vegetable, legumes, nuts, and low in salt, low in sugar or sugar-free, fat-free, particularly saturated and trans fats. We also know that a healthy diet is more sustainable from an environmental perspective and that it is related to a drop in greenhouse gas emissions and less use of fresh water and land as well. And it brings about less of a loss of biodiversity and deforestation. Now, we do know that we have seen an increase in the cost of a healthy diet. We have seen that ultra-processed food products have grown everywhere as a result of aggressive marketing, and we know that they're available everywhere at a low cost. So this is something of considerable concern and has an impact on unhealthy diets. So we need to have comprehensive solutions where health is the cornerstone of our ability to transform food systems. We need to focus less on monocrops and less on ultra-processed food ingredients. Moreover, we need to have a greater emphasis on producing more natural food and fostering the production of small farmers and greater diversity of local ancestral foods. So we have 7 different areas of action that we are focusing on to prevent the high rates of overweight and obesity in the region and to transform food systems and to make healthy diets more affordable. We are working on different fiscal policies as well. These include taxes on sugary drinks, to also including subsidies for healthy diets. We are also fostering public policies in the area of school food purchasing programs for hospitals, for schools, for public agencies, and we are also fostering different types of healthy drinks and foods, as well as substitutes for mother's milk. And we are also fostering regulations to limit the content of sodium in food and trans fats, and also regulating labeling, food labeling, including warnings, in addition to providing support for fortified staple foods to reduce deficiencies in micronutrients. Thank you, Leo Netherveen, Regional Advisor on Food, Nutrition, and Physical Activity from the WHO PAHO. All right, with that, we would like to thank the press for the various questions that we have received during the launch of the Regional Outlook 2024. I would like to mention that our communications teams will be available to handle different replies to inquiries and additional questions that may have remained pending. So I would also like to say that we are particularly pleased to have the national representation of the Guatemalan and Uruguayan office. We appreciate the high level of interest from all participants in this launch event and press conference. We have seen that more than 450 individuals have joined us here for this broadcast, and we would like to invite you to see the different websites of FAO Americas, IFAD, PAHO, UNICEF, and the WFP, where the full report and other communication resources on the results of this outlook may be available today. Thank you very much for your attention.